Governor Jeff Landry says that the New Orleans criminal justice system needs reform, and 3 bills in Baton Rouge aim to make changes.
But Sabrina Wilson reports opponents say that the proposed changes could cause chaos.
When addressing state lawmakers on Monday, Governor Landry made it clear he's unhappy with the criminal justice system in New Orleans.
Jacob Carter's murder was preventable.
Landry introduced the family of tourist Jacob Carter, a teenager killed Carter just outside the French Quarter in 2024.
His killer was a juvenile, already known to the system, arrested with 14 guns and drugs, and then released under electronic monitoring. During that same period, the monitoring contract expired without the judge or the district attorney either knowing or caring.
Landry calls on lawmakers to implement judicial reform.
And when judges treat ankle monitoring like a suggestion, or let contracts lapse, or ignore check-ins, that's not mistaken. They are incompetent.
Senate Bill 123 is a constitutional amendment to allow the governor to recommend the suspension or removal of a district attorney or judges. Lawmakers and voters would need to approve it.
I'm definitely not in support of that. I have a lot of questions about how it reflects the voting choices of the citizens of Orleans Parish here.
Jesse Manley is interim executive director of Court Watch NOLA, which the Business Council of New Orleans and others founded to bring transparency and efficiency to criminal courts.
There's always room for improvement, but I think in general, when I have conversations with people about how the judges are performing, I am actually trying to convince them that it's slightly better than their worst expectations.
I asked him if he's seen anything like malfeasance or negligence by judges.
I have not.
He says there are rulings and sentences he's disagreed with.
But I haven't seen anything that I would consider malpractice or malfeasance.
Disagreed with for being too harsh or too lenient?
Both.
Violent crime is significantly down, etc. And so, I mean, no system is perfect, no judge is perfect, etc.
Dillard University criminologist Dr. Ashraf Ismail sits on Court Watch NOLA's board.
The whole bill is unconstitutional. Every official in this state is elected, and every judge has discretion based off the information that's being presented.
There are also concerns about the independence of judges. Some say judges shouldn't have to worry about what the governor may think.
Concern, not just within the judiciary here in the city of New Orleans, but really within the judiciary across the state, that there would be this feeling of having to appease the legislature.
Senate Bill 217 reduces the number of civil court judges in New Orleans to 12 from 14, and SB 197 cuts the number of judges at the New Orleans Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals to 8 from 12.
I've always felt we need more judges. I mean, our system is really, if you've been in court, the system is backed up.
I'm Sabrina Wilson, Fonse, Local First.
We did reach out to the courts, but they had no comment. We didn't hear back from the DA.